Okay, so we are doing lesson 4-2, and like I said, there is a ton of overlap between 4-1 and 4-2 because we are still talking about scatter plots. We're still looking to see if it's negative correlation, positive correlation, or no correlation. We're going to add just a little bit of extra detail to the linear association answers, and then we're going to talk about nonlinear. Okay, so that's really it. So what I want you to do, we're going to do a little, like a, what do they call it? Like a tree, an information tree here. So when you are describing, helps if I unblank that. Okay, this is on page, you're just using the space on 225 to write this. When you are asked to describe association, okay, that's what we're doing. Now, notice this is different than describing a relationship. When we describe a relationship, we use the words increase, decrease, and we use the names of the axes, right? That's describing a relationship. When we're describing the association, we're describing whether or not it's positive, negative, linear, non-linear, and we're going to get into that here. All right, so if it is non-linear or no association, okay, that's it. And this will make more sense in a minute, but just go ahead and write, that's it. Meaning there's no more description that needs to be written down. Either you write nonlinear association or you write no association. That's it.
That's all we're doing.
Well, I've got step 2 here in a second, but yeah, that's it. It really isn't bad, and we don't have a lot of notes. When I say that's it, I mean that's all you have to write, okay? If it's nonlinear association, you just simply write nonlinear association, and you're done. If it's no association, which is that scatter, right, just that buckshot, then you write no association, and it's done. And I am okay if you abbreviate association as long as you use ASSOC. Okay, if you're going to abbreviate with the OC at the end, okay? All right. If it's linear, you got to get a little bit more descriptive, and this is the new part, okay? This is the new part that we're adding in on 4.2. If it is linear, today we are going to ask ourselves, from linear, we are going to ask ourselves 2 questions. Well, let me move that over, actually, because we're going to ask ourselves 2 questions on linear. If it's linear association, there are 2 extra things that you have to use to describe it. The first on this side is you have to say whether or not it is strong or weak association. The other thing you have to decide is it positive or negative? So I want you to write yourself this little note right here, okay? If it's a linear association, the answer is 4 words. Okay, your answer has to be 4 words. And the reason is that it has to be 4 words is because it has to say strong or weak, it has to say positive or negative, and then it'll say linear association. Okay? So if it's linear, your answer is going to be a little bit longer. If it's nonlinear or no association, there's no extra description that needs to go with it. All right? And we'll do a couple of these, and we'll kind of refer back to this a couple of times. Okay, does everybody have that part written down, or do I need to wait a minute? Okay. So let's look at this first example. Okay, first of all, they gave us a bunch of points on a table. We know that this is the X and this is the Y. That's a review. Okay, the X is height, the Y is arm span. Now, it says step 1, plot the data. That's what we did yesterday. Okay, this is the new part. We are actually going to draw a trend line through our data. Now, where it's like yesterday, we did this in our notes yesterday. Yesterday, when I was talking about negative or positive association and I was running my highlighter up this way, basically what I was doing was drawing a trend line. Okay, your trend line needs to go through the middle of your data, and it needs to rise at the same rate that your data rises. Okay, and if it's linear, it needs to be a straight line because it's linear. Okay, so saying that data is linear doesn't mean that it all lines up on an exact straight line. It means that it trends or it has a pattern in a straight line, either rising or falling. And so if you were going to draw a trend line in this data, once you plot it, this is kind of what you're doing. This is what this middle picture is. This is mentally, you're wanting to put your line in the middle of, kind of through the heart of your data, so you have a little above and a little below, okay? What you don't want to do, don't do this is just me doing the wrong thing. You don't want to run it up top your data. It's rising at the right rate, but it's not in the middle of your data, right? You don't want to run it under here. It's touching a few of your points and it's rising at the right rate. It's kind of rising at that right pattern, but you've got way too much data above it and none below it. So it's not kind of in that middle. So you want to fit it like they did in this pencil. You want to fit it where you're kind of in the middle. You got a few above and a few below and you're kind of right there in the middle. And then angle wise, right, you don't want to do something like this. That's way too steep. This is way too, even if you run it through these, right? Way too shallow. It's not rising at the same rate that the majority of your data is rising. So you just want to, and what I usually do is I take, and what you'll do when you're in your workbook, is I take a ruler and I just kind of sit and put it on my paper and kind of finagle my ruler, move it up, down, around a little bit until I've got my ruler edge running right through the middle of my data where it looks like it's a good trend line. And then you just draw the trend line. Okay? Sound good? All right, that is how you draw a trend line. So, whoops. It says Georgia and her classmates also measured their foot length. Use a pencil to find the trend line. Sketch the trend line for your scatter plot. So what they're telling you is use your pencil as what I said you would use a ruler for. So lay your pencil down on your paper, kind of move your pencil around, use it as a ruler's edge, or you can use a ruler if you have one, and kind of place a trend line somewhere going through that data where you're going through the heart of the data, right through the middle, little above, little below, and that you're rising at the same rate that your data rises. Okay, and then once you are comfortable that you have that good line in your head, kind of set where you want it, go ahead and draw it in. Now, with trend lines, not everybody's is going to be identical. Should they be very, very, very close? Yes, because there's some rules that you have to follow, but is everybody's going to be identical? No, and that's okay. As long as yours isn't something wild like, like going up this way or something like that, as long as it's not something really way out of the perimeters, then you're okay, all right? All right, strength of linear association. We've already talked about this because we already did that little tree diagram up on that first page. So again, you only discuss the strength when it is linear. So I want you to underline the word linear here, because you only worry about discussing the strength if it's linear. If it's not linear, you don't have to worry about this, okay? This one is an example of weak association. This is an example of strong association. Okay, the difference is that in weak association, they are all still trending up, but they're just not really sucked in tight to that trend line. There's kind of a wide path. It's still trending up, and they all still trend together, but it's just kind of a wider path. The strong association, they are all tucked in really, really tight. Now, what you have to be careful of, and they've got this example here, they have this as strong association with an outlier. And what you want to be careful of is you don't want to say that this one is weak association. If you have one or two max, okay, one rogue point, you throw them out of the equation. You don't think about them when you're drawing your trend line. They have absolutely no effect on where you put your trend line or how you angle your trend line. If it's one rogue point, if it's right, you couldn't call this and this and this and this and this an outlier. That doesn't work. That's too many. When you have that many, they're not outliers. Outliers, by very definition, are very rare, right? So you're not going to have a bunch of outliers. So if you have something that's kind of spread out but trending, it's association, it's just weak association. When you have a lot of them, all of them, right, really tight on the line, you're still going to call it strong correlation, but you're just going to have an outlier. So there is a difference between weak association and strong association with an outlier, okay? And you just have to use your best judgment on whether or not you think it is one or the other. The main way is if you have one single rogue point always throw him out of the equation for a minute. Just draw your trend line based on the cluster, okay? All right, then we've got nonlinear association. First of all, when you have that, your answer is simply going to be nonlinear association. That's it, right? Very basic answer. You don't have a lot of descriptive points. And how do you know it's nonlinear? Well, it's definitely not no association because you can see a pattern, right? You can, even if I said draw it in there, you could draw a pattern and you can see the flow of the points go a certain they go together in a certain direction. They just don't do it linear. So it is still association, but it's nonlinear association, okay? So our three choices then are linear, nonlinear, or no association. And this is just a reminder, you already have it on that other page. If it's linear, your answer has to be 4 words because you have to use those descriptive words. So if you look at example A on this try it, first of all, is it linear, nonlinear, or no association? It's linear. They all trend up together, and you can draw a pretty nice trend line. Now, since it's linear, we got to use some descriptive words. First of all, would you say it's strong or weak? Yep, all the points are really tightly tucked into our trend line. So it is strong. What's the other thing we have to use to describe it? Positive, good. It is strong, positive, and then linear association. So when it's linear, you've got to have 4 words to describe it because you have to have those descriptors of weak or strong, positive or negative. Okay? How about B? Linear or nonlinear? Or no association? There's definitely a pattern, but is it linear? Right. It's nonlinear. And since it's nonlinear, that's our only description needed. Okay? You can if I said draw a pattern on here, you could definitely see that there's a pattern, right? It's just a nonlinear pattern. And you don't have to draw a pattern on nonlinear ones because there is no trend line to draw. And then how about this one? No association. Good. All right. That is it. I told you today's notes were short and there was not a whole lot of new material. The main new thing that we added was our descriptive words for linear ones and drawing that trend line. Okay? So if you ever need it, on the next page on 228, there is the key concepts, examples of linear, examples of nonlinear, and examples of strong and weak correlation or association. Okay? Your assignment is workbook page 229 and 230, 6 through 14, and that is on Canvas. All right? And you've got a few minutes that you can maybe work on it in class. It is due tomorrow at the beginning of class, and for those of you at home, email me if you have any questions.